Dana Mulvaney. She's on her way in traffic, but we'll go ahead and get started. Let me turn my paper over. The Discovery Series is our way, the Dorchester Heritage Center, of bringing the history out into the community. COVID shut everybody down for a couple of years, but now that we're back open, we invite everyone to come up to the Dorchester Heritage Center in St. George, which is in the former Dorchester County Courthouse. We had this last month at the Ponds, and we also had Chief Creole from the Natchez Kusso tribe as one of our speakers, along with Professor Aga, talking about the St. Giles Kusso plantation off the Ashley River. I also want to recognize a special guest tonight. Mr. Al Jenkins is here tonight from Senator Tim Scott's office. We want to welcome you, Mr. Jenkins, and thank you for coming tonight. Also, this event is also sponsored in part by the South Carolina Humanities Council. They have been a partner with us on many times, many grants over the years. They are a nonprofit organization inspiring, engaging, and enriching South Carolinians with programs on literature, history, culture, and heritage. This evening's event is the first of what we hope will be many opportunities for the Dorchester Heritage Center to bring our communities together from across the county to Ridgeville to learn from each other and from our shared histories. We're so glad to be a part of this community, and we do thank you for joining us tonight. Our first speaker tonight is Chief Collins from the Wassamasaw tribe out of Varnertown. Lisa graduated valedictorian from Berkeley High School and went on to get her RN in nursing. She has worked at various hospitals throughout the state over the past 25 years and now is a nursing administrator at the Veterans Victory Home in Walterboro. Lisa has received many awards and accolades throughout the years for her hard work and dedication to preserving the history and culture of her tribe. Most recently, she has been named as a 2022 History Hero from the Daniel Island Historical Society. During the early 2000s, Lisa Collins was one of the driving forces leading the charge for official tribal recognition. Collins has been voted in as the tribal administrator for the past 16 years and has served as a member of the tribal government for more than 20. After gaining tribal recognition, Lisa has continued to push for tribal growth and recognition from the South Carolina government and general population. Chief Collins, we welcome you tonight, and when you come up, if you would you recognize members of your tribal council that are here with you tonight? Thank you so much.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing us to come and share our history and culture with you. I would like to introduce you to members of our tribal board and council. We have Mr. Creighton Cordray, if you would stand. He's tribal council member. Janie Shumack, tribal council member. Heidi Varner Seabrook, vice chief of the tribe. Joshua Shumack, he's a tribal council member. And of course, he's saying no, don't announce me. Support system, Lauren Shumack, husband, spouse of Jamie. Again, thank you for allowing us to be here. This is not my computer, so I'm going to try. All right. So, Wassamasaw tribe of Varnertown Indians is located in what is now Carnes Crossroads community. You see a lot of development down there now. Our community span from pretty much Cypress Gardens Road up to 176, across 176 into what's Ridge Baptist Church area, what we call, Turkerstown and those other communities historically were named, all the way up 176 to Wassamasaw to Jedburgh Road And so we have a huge area where our family has resided, how we've come together as a community to live and preserve our culture and traditions. So we were rural for the longest time. Had to be bused everywhere, you know, that kind of thing. But development has come into the community, and you're not seeing a lot of our traditional family lands anymore. They're being bought, or they're being rezoned. And when they get rezoned to be commercial. And when they get commercial land, then we can't even afford to keep those lands within the family lines. And so we're seeing a lot of issues with development. I think that's also happening in Ridgeville right now with the development that's occurring. So what does it mean to be state recognized in the state? So we had to go through a process that we show to the state that we have over 100 years of indigenous rights here, that we were here before colonial contact, that our community was in existence, that we had our own schools, our own businesses, our own ways of life. We were a unique community, separate from the majority or dominant society. And so we went through the process and we gained recognition. And I have to admit, I did not do the slides. I talk about it. Joshua actually did these slides, so I'm going to try to read a little bit and I'm going to skip a little bit just to keep the flow going. So we have over 100 years and have legal and documented claim to the native bloodlines that we represent. This is done to protect tribal communities and establish governments from infringement and impersonation. So it's very, very hard because the Native American people are the only people that have to prove that they're Native American. Everybody else can say, I am Caucasian, I'm white, I'm Pacific Islander, and they mark it on a form and they go on. But when you're Native American, you have to prove it. And that's very hard, especially when all the documentation that is out there for Native Americans were established or are done by the white society. And I'm just saying that. So if you were not classified correctly, instead of saying you're Native American, they said you're a mulatto or something like that, it's hard to kind of prove your existence for the longest time. And there was something called paper genocide, where those documents were destroyed. So we have to bring in anthropologists and all these people that know our Native American history to come in just to make sure that we are validated to be Native American. And that's not very good when you talk about your identity and who you are, and you can't just go and say, I'm Native American. And when you go to places that do not understand Native American communities that are in existence around them, and you go to doctor's offices or down to the DMV, and you mark a form, sometimes they fill out those forms. So in old time days, they'll fill out those forms for you when you go in, and they mark what they think they see, and they don't ask. And so we want to determine and self-identify who we are. So the difference between state recognized and federal recognized is that if you want federal recognition, you have to go through a different process. There's two ways to be federally recognized. You can go through the Department of Interior, through the BIA, and that takes a long, long time, takes a lot of money. There's no guarantee that you're going to get through the process. And if you do get recognition, they can terminate your recognition at any time. And then you can get recognition through Congress, and legislatively, they'll pass a bill that says that you're recognized, and it has to be signed off by the House and the Senate and the President. Now, I'm going through these slides, and I told everyone here that if you have any questions at any time, stop me. This is the time to ask if you need clarification or you want me to expand on anything I'm talking about today. So there's only one tribe in South Carolina at this time that is federally recognized, and that is the Catawba tribe up in Rock Hill. All right. We do have 9 state-recognized tribes. We just met today at the Commission for Minority Affairs. They're listed there. The 3 that are locally in this area are the Natchez, Kusso, Edisto tribe, Santee Indian Organization, and of course our tribe, the Wassamasaw tribe of Varnertown Indians. I talked about where we are located. We do have a historical marker on 17A, not far from Carnes Crossroads, that discuss William's descendant, Mary Williams, who married William Varner. William Varner is a descendant of a native slave from the Varner plantation and had many children. So I know, I told them I wasn't going to do genealogy, but sometimes you can't get away from it. So they married and they lived in the settlement native community near Carnes Crossroads. And so that's what signs there. We had our own school system in the community. I don't know if you saw, how long ago were they doing the naming of the school? About 6 months ago or less. We were advocating, name it Wassamasaw, because it was right there in the community and they're building this school. And we had a Native American school and we're like, our children probably will be attending this school, so it's so close. Let's go ahead and honor their heritage, their history, and give them something to be proud of. But of course, you know, we didn't make that. And so it's being named after someone else who probably really deserve it. But we did want to give back to the community something to honor because we did have a school up until 1962. So what happened during that time was desegregation. So once desegregation came in, we had to leave our state-supported school, and you know, these schools were supported by the state of South Carolina, and they were funded, and we had a teacher, and we were in a one-room school, and they desegregated, and we had to be bused in to the schools. So a lot of our community members had a hard time assimilating. So that's why we had a high dropout rate. We have a higher rate of people who are not getting their high school diploma, maybe having a GED or less if they were that lucky, or going to college. So education is very important in our communities. So I'm not going to read these slides unless I really need to. So if you want to read them, can you read these slides? So who are our people? What are our bloodlines? Because some people say, I'm Cherokee, I am Catawba, I am whatever. So I'm like, I've never heard of Wassamasaw tribe of Varnertown Indians. So our community is very unique. I mean, when we got recognition for the state of South Carolina, it took a state archaeologist and some professors to make the state understand who we were. So we're going to go through these slides to tell you how we came about. But we have multiple native lineages in our tribe, in our community. We were a settlement community. What does that mean? It means a bunch of native people got together and lived together from different lines and settled in the area. Plus we had the Edisto tribe that came in to the settlement community, and we lived like that for hundreds of years. And what caused us to be a settlement community is what I'm going to go over. But we have 8 lineal lines, and each of our lines has like a surname attached to it that traces back to our native heritage. So native people I keep looking over at my Natchez Kusso people because I know they understand. But native people have a fun way of like, are you Creole? We don't say, are you Cherokee, or are you Catawba? Are you a Scott? Are you a Muckafoos or Muckabany? That's how we know. And I'm going to tell a story. I'm sorry, I'm always on the tangent. I went to work at Veterans Victory House, had never been there, and I'm on my orientation, and they say to me, Lisa, we're going to match you up with a nurse here who's going to train you and get you acclimated to the facility. And I went to meet the nurse, and she opened her mouth and started talking. And I thought, oh my God. I said, you from Ridgeville? I said it that way. And she says, well, my daddy's a Creole. I said, I knew it. I knew it. We have our own unique speech patterns. We have our own unique ways of talking to one another. A lot of times, people who speak to our elders may not understand fully what they're saying. They're like, what language is that? I remember many a times we would have to interpret for our elders because we have a very unique way of expressing ourselves in our speech. So anyway, we know our native people because of kinship ties, being around them, because of miscegenation laws. So we'll talk about that. Etowah. We have our Etowah heritage. So the Etowah were Indians that resided on Daniel Island. And when they got pushed off, they settled in the St. James Parish of Goose Creek. And they were friendly to the white settlers and the colonists, and they were peaceful people. And they were involved in the Embassy War. You'll see a slide with that. And after all of that, they were granted a land west of the Wassamasaw where they were to live. But during the time, the numbers were decimated. There weren't a lot of those native people. And with raiding tribes and with other things that were happening for safety, they assimilated into the settlement community. So the Etowah people are a lineage through our Varner line that is a part of our community, and we have a lot of heritage that's Etowah related. Over on the side, you'll see some quotes that are from the history books that talks about what we look like, what are some of our traditions. Let me read something. It says, the missionary Francis Lejeune described the Etowahs as having a deep chestnut color. Hair was black and straight, eyes black and sparkling. I'm glad they sparkle. With little or no hair on their chins and well-limbed and featured. But one thing I find interesting was some of our burials. When someone dies, they anoint them all over with this oil, and had hickory nuts for other things that they did for their burial. And then when they danced, how they would join together with their arms under their arms and dance in a dance like a serpentine dance. We call that, some communities call it a stomp dance or something like that. So that's with some of our traditions. Any questions on Etowah? All right. Edisto heritage. So Edisto Island had some Edistos, and there's the Edisto mounds. How did the Edistos get all the way over here? So there was a descendant, Indian Mary, who married Dangerfield. And no, had Hannah Edens who married Dangerfield. I'll get it straight. And their children had 4 sons. And those 4 sons had a plantation in St. John's, Berkeley, which is right beside the St. James Parish of Goose Creek. And those 4 sons married into our community. And they have a long-standing history with our people. The Broad line came from George Broad, who had a neighboring plantation to Mr. Dangerfield. And he also had a native slave named Daphne. He had children, loved Daphne. But during the time, you could not leave land to people of color. And there was slavery. So he went to Mr. Dangerfield and said, hey, I want this land to be for Daphne and my kids. Would you be the caretaker for this land after I'm gone? So when he died, Mr. Dangerfield made sure the land was a home for the children of George Broad and Daphne. He did it so well that the children of this man said he treated him the children of George better than he treated us. Well, guess what happened after Mr. Dangerfield died? The children were not very happy to keep the promise and took the land. So these are some of the family lines in history. But the Edisto people are Dangerfield. Now, well, you can say Santee's got some Dangerfield, and the Edisto definitely has some Dangerfield. Why is that? It's called kinship. So when you're wanting to marry someone and have a family, you didn't marry your sister or the people of your own community and your own lines, you went and found kin or kinship ties. So you went to the Santee area, you went to the Edisto area, and when we have singings and get-togethers, we meet people and like, oh, I like that lady over there, and you marry. And so you'll see that there are kinship ties between our community and Santee and kinship ties to the Natchez Kusso. Any questions on the Edisto heritage? Everybody good with that? Cherokee. So we do have Cherokee in Catawba. We have what we call affidavits. And how do you know you got some Cherokee? How do you know you have Catawba? Well, we have to research and see what our affidavits are showing. So there was an affidavit in St. James Parish, Goose Creek, that said a Catawba woman had these children, and we descend from one of those children. So the Clark line is Catawba. And if you're an anthropologist, you know there's a huge Clark line in the recognized Catawba community. So we have a Clark line that's Catawba, and Cherokee, you've got Burbages and people like that that are Cherokee. How do they get to your community? Well, guess where the Cherokee Path went through? So the Cherokee Path for trade went all the way and down by our community all the way to Charleston. So these people traveling the Cherokee Path stopped, and some stayed. And we do have lines of historic Cherokee and Catawba in our community. So there's a lot of intersecting trade paths, and you know, they want to talk about, oh, they brought their goods. Those Catawba pots didn't make that journey from Rock Hill down to Charleston. They didn't do it that way. What they did was they came and found a community they could stay at, dig the clay. A lot of times it was on the Edisto River, and they would dig the clay and make their pots and sell them in Charleston. So they didn't travel with their pots from their tribal lands. So here's a map of kind of what that Cherokee path looked like. You see where Monk's Corner Goose Creek is, and that path that went right through there. Okay, we're not always peaceful people, and of course with different things like the Embassy War, there were some natives that really did not get along with the colonial people, and there were always disputes, and some natives will side with other native people and some sided with white settlers. So the Embassy War happened, and it was a huge war, but after that there was a lot of decimated tribes, and Etowah was granted a lot of those people that were from these decimated tribes into the area. So, but the Etowah switched sides. They started out friendly with with the white settlers, and then they decided to say, oh no, this is not for us. So they switched sides, and later they fought against the South Carolinians that had settled. Because of the multitude of tribes who were involved and the large area where fighting took place, there was no definitive end to the conflict. So much of the large battles were over in the first few months. There was peace treaties established, the Cherokee Alliance of early 1716, and various peace treaties with the Creek and the Muskogean people. So the Embassy War was important to establish who was friendly with you and who was not. So after that war, kind of were scattered. And so they came to these communities, and that's when the Etowah approached the Common House of Assembly to provide means of support for their dwindling numbers. And that's where we ended up with our Etowah people. It was less than 200 people, and they just could not defend themselves and settled in the area. Schools. I started off talking about the schools. So in the late 1800s, my mom and my elders would say, oh, you're so-and-so with the 10-mile hill school up there. I'm like, where in the world's 10-mile hill? Or they said, well, you know, if you go down Rivers Avenue, there used to be a Shoney's down there. That's 10 miles. And there used to be a school called Pineview. And Pineview was a school for Native American children. After that school was closed, there were also other missionary schools that were established. I don't know why it's always been the mission of good Methodist and Baptist people to bring in Native people in to preach the word of the Lord and baptize them and do all that. So we had the Barrows Mission School, which existed up 17A near where Gilliard Road is. There's a Methodist church there now. It used to be a school on the corner there. Now it was almost on the Dangerfield land right there. And there was a plantation called Barrows Plantation. But to say all of this, they attended these schools and they were Christianized, baptized. There was also in Somerville the St. Barnabas Mission School. We also had one they called the Red School because the door was red. The Barnabas Mission School was established almost in the heart of Somerville. Many of our Dangerfield, Driggers people went to that school. The building still exists. It's one of the oldest material culture schools that still exists. It's now located where the seminary is in Somerville. If you go down 17 and you see where I think is it Lutheran Seminary, Mr. West? It's Episcopalian, okay. There's the St. Barnabas Church School that's on the property. They use it to have practices for their sermons and their teachings. So they saved it, the church saved it because they were going to tear it down and we would have lost that material culture. So a lot of our material culture doesn't exist today because of people destroying it. It doesn't even have to be ours. We associate with a lot of our history. You look at Carnes Crossroads, and Dallas Carnes' house used to sit right there on Carnes Crossroads with the barn in the back. Yeah. A lot of our family were there working on Dallas Carnes, little place there. And overnight, we woke up one day and the house was gone. And there was a big uproar about it because, you know, with development, if you don't have people in the know of what's going on, private development can remove that stuff and destroy it. So there was such an uproar about the destruction of the Dallas Carnes home that they compromised. They said, we're going to save the barn. So they moved the barn off the property over there to where they developed the community and houses and made it a community center. And they still have the barn. So we had the Varner Indian School right there off of 17A, about a mile from Carnes Crossroads. And all the kids would go when they were not working in the fields. They would go to this one-room school, and the last teacher was Miss D. Hay. And Miss D. Hay would teach all the grades up to about 6th grade. And she would teach the students. And USC Lancaster came down to do some recording of our history and would ask about the school and said to our elders, did you benefit from this school? Do you feel like you lost any opportunities by going to this one-room school? And they said, actually, it was better for us. Why was it better? because they helped one another. Those who were advanced could listen to the next person over who was older giving their lessons, and they would learn faster, and those who were not as quick would get help. The family members would cook in the school and feed the children. They had schedules that worked around their needs in their family life, with working in the fields or working to bring crops in and things they needed to do to survive. So it was very hard for them to move from a school where everybody looked like one another, knew one another, were not judgmental, and get desegregated and go to a school where no one looked like them. No one understood who they were. There was no education about the Native American people coming into the school system. They didn't feel accepted. They didn't feel accepted by the whites in the school, and of course, the African American population. So they just felt like they were in between two worlds. And so there was a huge dropout rate for our students. This is a picture of one of the latest classes, 1957. All those students are natives from Varnertown. They look different, don't they? They don't all look the same. That's the thing about being Native American. You could go to one tribe up north and they look different than the tribe here in South Carolina. But Native, stereotypical things people like to say, oh, I got high cheekbones too, or my hair is straight. That's not what we judge being Native about. You can have, and I might step on some toes here, you might have Native American blood and we celebrate that. But if you have not lived as Native American people in a community and in the traditions and the history that you grew up in, you don't understand what it is to be Native American. That's just fact. So one of our elders or progenitors, like we would like to say, Mr. Geneva Varner Clark, she lived in this little house and had a bunch of kids. And I don't know if you can see this gentleman on the end with his hands in his pocket by his mom, Mr. Joe Clark. That happens to be my grandpa. And back in 1938, during the Depression, Miss Marion Post Wolcott was going around taking pictures of families and things going on to the Depression, people doing things and how to survive. And she came to our community and took these pictures. And she took pictures of our sorghum farm. And sorghum is almost like sugar cane. And they would make sugar from sorghum. And they took pictures of the pot, the cooking pot, and the press, and our mud chimney, as you can see. But that was just how we lived. But she was just so proud. One thing that we're proud of about her is that she announced when it was not very cool to tell people you were Native American. She says, I'm Indian. And that's how she got recorded. When I talked to you about paper genocide and finding documentation, it was very important for her to do that for her community. Because back in 1938, she was Native. And her children are there. So that is actually part of the Library of Congress. This is the start of documented bloodlines. That does not mean that's the start of our actual Native blood. So what does it mean, documented? So although our settlement community has been in existence well before the late 1700s, most of the documented Native bloodlines only started to be seen in records when white men began to either marry into the Indian community or have children with Native women in the community. Patterns of affidavits being established trying to prove that they were Native. Why did they do that? Because during the time of slavery, you could be a free person of color. Free person of color were Native people. Sometimes you had to prove you're a free person of color. So you would have to get affidavits from people say, yeah, I know that family. Yeah, she's always been Native American. Or they get taxation. And if you were a free person of color, you didn't get taxed. So the Dangerfield line has documentation that they went to court and said, I'm not paying your tax. I'm a native person and I'm exempt from paying your taxes. And hey, they won their case because of that decapitation tax. So we have our 8 native family bloodlines that are documented as Broad, Burbage, Clark, Driggers, Dangerfield, Huff, Varner, Williams. We have some major lines and those that kind of married in and their descendants all became native because of their lineal descent from that person. We just had a discussion at our tribal banquet about blood quantum because a lot of our western tribes do their membership or saying you're part of the tribe if you're a quarter Cherokee or you're whatever 1/8 native blood quantum. It's very hard to do on the East Coast because even those people that says they're 100% are not 100%. What they do is they had colonial contact before removal, and they've already kind of mixed their bloodlines before they get removed out west. And when they get moved out west, they put their names on the roll, and they're called the Dawes roll or whatever roll. Well, they weren't 100% when they were on the roll, so that's what they count 100% to start, when they start talking about blood quantum. That's why people like my poor cousin, Mr. Jenkins, had the pleasure to meet, wants to talk about, when I do my DNA on Ancestry.com, why doesn't it come out that I'm 100% native? Well, no, none of them do that. What it does is it takes whatever lines are in your blood. It might be a mixture of, you have English or Spanish or whatever, and it goes into a database. If you don't have a huge community of native people that's in that database, it's not going to hit that you're whatever percent. So please don't think if you do your DNA that you're going to find out that your great-grandmother was a Cherokee princess. I hear that too. All right, so I know you want to talk about history and culture, so I want to bring a little bit of culture into it. Before I go to the culture, Joshua was good to tell you what I've already said. The Clark line descends from William Clark. There was an affidavit for him and his 2 siblings, and he descended from a Native American woman of the Catawba Nation, and he was born in St. James Goose Creek Parish. He was the son of Joseph Clark. His son was Joseph Clark. So that was about 1779. The Dangerfield line, Indian Mary and Hannah Dedes, there's your affidavits there. We kind of spliced them in. William Elliott Indians had a daughter with Indian Mary, an Edisto Indian. That daughter, Hannah Dedes, was born late 1700s. She died about 1857. She married John R. Dangerfield, the son of William Dangerfield, who came to South Carolina during the American Revolutionary War. Their 4 sons were John, Morton, William, and James. And that's who we descend from. Hannah Williams. This is our Williams line. The progenitor of our Williams line is Hannah Williams. She was born around mid-1700s. She and her sister Bathsheba were of Native American Edelman descent. And Bathsheba married a gentleman named Ironhawk. Driggers line, Elizabeth Driggers. There's several documented sources showing Elizabeth Driggers, wife of Moses, a free Indian of Cherokee Native American ancestry, and to help establish the St. Barnabas mission. When you look in the history of St. Barnabas, it says they moved into the Pineland. You know, Mr. West and I talk about this. You know, when they came into Somerville, the Pineland village, they came, we were here, and we were living here and having people come into her home and having services in her home. So they decided to build a church and build a school. So she was very welcoming to the people coming into the area. I talked about Daphne. George Broad was a German immigrant who settled in the area in the late 1700s and owned a plantation next to Varnertown. The plantation was owned by John Dangerfield of the Dangerfield native line. He fell in love with an Indian slave. I told you the story with her children. In his will, George knew he could not legally leave his land to Daphne and the children, so he entrusted his neighbor, John Dangerfield, to look after his estate and take care of his family. It was all good until Mr. Dangerfield died. Burbage line was from John Burbage, 1780 to 1850. He was the son of Thomas Burbage and Elizabeth Platt. See them Platts over there? You don't know? Kinship ties. John had a son named Thomas Burbage who married Mary Ann Broad from the Broad line. So when I talk to you about tracing your native lineages, this is what confused the Commission for Minority Affairs, who was established to, or they had legislation to recognize and do state recognition. They said, Lisa, can you take your membership and say which line do they descend from? I said, do I? They said, we need you to take your membership and say which of your native lines each one descends from. I said, I can't do that. She said, and it was Miss Janie Davis at the time. I said, Miss Davis, you don't understand. I'm going to use myself as an example. I said, I am Lisa Leach. That's my maiden name. My mother is Loretta Clark. Her dad is Joe Clark, whose mama was a Varner. Her mother, who was Clarabelle, was a Broad. You see where I'm going with this? By the time I finished my little lineage, I had every one of them lines in there. I said, ma'am, we can't do that. Our tree don't branch like that. It kind of twists up on itself. So we were very unique, and that's what happens in what the Santee Indian Organization and the Edisto Natchez Kusso organization have very much in common, that they have multiple lines in their family. And the biggest thing about our group that is very similar to Catawba and the Cherokee, we're indigenous to South Carolina. We didn't migrate here. We did not come down with the lumber trade from Lumbee, North Carolina. We were always here. We met the boat when it came. So when we say we're truly indigenous, that is just fact.
Question.
Yes, ma'am.
So all these names, Huff, Broad, Burbage, are they what I would call English names?
Right. So what you're seeing is that white men who are English or German or whatever their descendancy are marrying or having relations with Native people. And their descendants are Native. And we're tracing our lines to the Native. So I discussed this with some other people. How do you trace your Native lines? Well, we're matriarchal. It's always through the mom. So that's how we do ours. We're a matriarchal society. So we go through the mother's line and trace your lineage to Native ancestry. Alrighty. So Rose Varner is the progenitor of the Varner line. She was the only documented Native slave on the Varner plantation, which is in the Wassamasaw area. She had several children, and they're listed there. And a bunch of those people came to live from Wassamasaw all day on 176 and in the settlement community. All right. Huff line, William Huff, James Huff, and Daniel Huff were the first Huffs of our documented Indian descent. They were the sons of John Huff and Elizabeth Burbage. So the Indian didn't really come from Huff, Mr. John Huff. It came from Miss Elizabeth. And then their children who are named Huff are now Native because they have that Native line in them. So the Huffs married into both the Burbage and the Drippers lines, which, you know, they didn't get diluted as time goes. They kind of grabbed some from the Triggers line and some from the Dangerfield line and Varner and Clark. So by the time we're all here, we all kind of look alike, different shades of whatever, but that's how we do it. So here's a copy of the baptism roll from August the 4th, 1889 at the St. Barnabas Mission School. Shows the children on John and Elizabeth Huff alongside the Driggers' children being baptized. So these records are still in with, I'm not sure, Mr. West, do you know who has those records? St. Paul's? And I talk about kinship. Why is kinship important? Well, during the time of miscegenation laws, you could not, it was illegal to marry outside the race. So you had to marry someone that was of color. So you will see that we have a huge kinship to different communities. We're got kinship to Santee. We have Lavinia Broad marrying James Scott of the Santee and having children. We have Edith Clark married Alex Scott and had children. Rhodey Elizabeth Dangerfield married Morgan Platt, had children. Herman Dangerfield married Virgilie Scott. So you see the name Scott and Dangerfield a lot in there. So we also have people of the Sackawau Chippewa. So when you even leave the state and you go somewhere else, you're still finding those kinship ties to other communities. So we have Sackawau Chippewa. If you go upstate, you have the Beaver Creek tribe. We've got people married there. The Cherokee. We have Edisto tribe. Uncle Booty. I know he was known as Willie Broad. He was my grandmother's brother. He married Miss LaMay Muckenfoos and had a child. Kenneth Dangerfield married Elaine Creel and had children. Odell Bourne married Margaret Muckenfoos. Names are very familiar there. Doreen Bourne. Even today, we have a tribal member, Rosie Varner, married McGinnis Muckenfoos. All right, so we've got a whole line of kinship to Native American communities across the state. So we're spreading awareness throughout our communities. There's some pictures of things that we have done, trying to bring awareness of our community and awareness of our needs of our community. We do a lot of things within our community to promote preservation. We have had an exhibit at USC Lancaster to try and educate people on who we are, where we're located. So let's talk about culture. When we were going through the recognition process, and I think I'm talking up here, we had to explain what were some of our traditions and practices, and as we were talking about it, we're like, well, is that Native? And when we start researching things, we're like, oh yeah, that was Native. And my mom cracked me up one day. She says, well, I thought we did that because we were poor and we was country. But we do have Native traditions and some things that represent who we are. We have adopted these tribal symbols. So you'll see a shell as one of our tribal symbols. We use a shell a lot. You might place them on graves. Coastal tribal people like the Etowah and the Edisto utilize many elements of the water to enhance their lives. Shells were used in many ways. So shellfish such as oysters and clams were a large part of their diet. The shells were used for raw materials. They adorned their clothing with it. They also made tools. So shells were left on the graves with notes under it sometimes for the deceased loved ones. So some of the graves in our community cemetery might see a shell on that. Don't touch the shells. The tree represents many live oaks and pine trees that surround the settlement community on that Cherokee path. Trees were very important for timber and building, but we also used the sapling oaks to utilize for construction of what we did was oak splint basket making. So Lummi do pine needles, the long pine needles for constructing baskets, the Catawba, and us who use oak splints. Our symbols, we have the corn. Corn was a big staple of our diet. Corn is grown and utilized in many dishes that we eat. You know, we love grits and cornbread and hoe cakes and all of that. Cherokees were known to make corn husk dogs for their children. The use of corn was greatly used in the making of moonshine. Lord, we have a huge moonshine history in our community, up to very recently, maybe still. But they're quick to tell you, now I can have so much legally in my possession. So the moonshine is a big part of our community. That's probably why we had sorghum for sugar, because how do you catch moonshiners back then? You know, they bought all the sugar for their fermenting process and take down to the still. So we had to make our own sometimes, you know. The leaf symbolized medicine and knowledge and healing used by the elders in the community. They always had their own home remedies, and I'll tell you right now, I'm very skeptical when they said, oh, I got something, my grandfather want to give you something for your cough? I'd rather cough. I don't know what's in your home remedy right now, but it worked. It worked. The fish was a huge staple in the Varnertown community diet. Being a coastal people, fish were readily available and utilized. To this day, our community are big fishermen people. And we were trying to work with CMA to try and work with to get on about doing free fishing license. Boy, they got really excited over that. So that has not happened yet because the DNR is doing some kind of survey. If they give out all those free fishing licenses, how that might negatively impact their funds coming in. So hopefully that'll happen. The deer represents the hunting skills that are still prevalent today. Traditionally, they would hunt deer and wild hog. There was named squirrels, possums, turkeys, ducks, and birds, and they were trapped and hunted for food. And the last couple of symbols are our cultivation symbols. The flower, big thing in our community was the cultivation of plants. They had a tradition of locating what they wanted to cultivate during the time they were blooming in the woods. They would go and tie cord or ribbon and wait till it was time to cut or dig up those plants to cultivate. A lot of our ancestors worked on a lot of, I don't want to say nurseries and things like that, and they worked with the plants. They were a great asset in that way. And the jug was pottery, part of our tradition. It also represents our little moonshine corn liquor thing for our community, and that's why we had the sorghum. So at this time, just want to ask if anyone has any questions, anything you want me to discuss, anything more in depth, anything I didn't tell you. I think I've talked enough. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Personal question.
Sure.
In our family history, we have two Native Americans, a woman, a grandmother, great-great-grandmother, and great-great-grandfather, but all we have is names, and the family, our great-grandparents said, those were Native Americans. But I can't find, where do I go to get records? Where would I go to search? It's up in the Seneca area?
So, in research and genealogy, it is very difficult. So what we do is we have a nice little subscription because we used to be living at the archives at the state, pulling all those records. We have a subscription to Ancestry that we look at census records from the comfort of home. So what we do is we look at the dates of your family member, and you look at census records. You see how they are placed in census records, but you don't stop there. You look to see where they're living, who's living around them. Sometimes that works. Just be aware that when you get to 1850 in your census records, they're going to stop itemizing or numerating everybody in your household. They're just going to put the head of household. And then it doesn't go any further past that, because some of the records were destroyed. So you might 1790, and then you have to do other ways. We look at records in Bibles. We look at death records. We look at, what's that? Court records, that's another one too. So it is very difficult. Sometimes we have to get help with ours, especially in our family who likes to name people after people they love and admire, and we got 15 million Mary whatever, or Hannah's, and they all repeat and they repeat. And you have someone named William for 10 generations, and I'm like, which William is this? So it is very difficult. Sometimes communities have to hire genealogists and anthropologists to come in to help with that. But I would start with census records. And they're very much digitized and up to date now that they can start trying to connect to other records that are on file, and it makes tracing it a little bit easier. But I would not jump around. I would start at one date and then work back. Find that one, then work back, because it's easy to get sidetracked and not find where you are. But that's not much help.
I'm just so curious of what tribe they were, what.
Right. Well, you're not going to find on those records, oh, this is a Cherokee person. You may find more court records that do that, or if they're numerated in something else, like a newspaper article, or so back in 1950 and before that, when people, obituaries are good, funeral home stuff is good too. I've been to, can I see all your records in your files? So they would put people as color as special. You'll see obituary that says special. Those are people of color. Sometimes funeral homes will bury because they're comfortable, because they know you are people and they're the way you like to do things. You couldn't go to the white funeral home. You had to go to the funeral home for people of color, and there's one that we use all the time, still do. There's only 2 or 3 we use. So we're like, oh, that dies? Okay, now Murray, all right. That's how we know. And then, so a lot of times when I say look around where they're living, they live in the communities together. You'll find a native community, and if they're living there, there's a connection. Any other questions?
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm sorry I couldn't be more helpful with that. Any other questions? Okay. I didn't.
Did Dana make it in? There she is. Hey Dana, we're glad you made it. I'd like to introduce Dana McElvaney, is a council member of the Edisto, Natchez, Kusso tribe of South Carolina. She resides in Charleston and is a 20-year employee with the Kiowa Island Community Association. In December of 2019, she became an official member of the Tribal Council. Dana serves as the chairperson for Tribal Development, Tribal Events, and Tribal History Genealogy Committees. She also serves as a committee member on other tribal committees such as the Cultural Outreach, Administrative, and the State and Federal Recognition Committee. Dana is also a member of the Dorchester Heritage Center's Education Committee and the Dorchester 250th Committee. We welcome you, Dana. Glad you made it. And if you have any from your tribal council, if you'd like to introduce them, we welcome you. I am so honored to.
Are you? Okay.
Appreciate you.
Thank you guys for letting me speak. I am Horse. I took our dance children, a group of us took our dance group, our Jane's children to a powwow up in Wassamasaw, and somebody had cooties, and I got it. So I'm a little hoarse. I may stop and pause for a cough. I got a cough drop, not contagious. Our chief Creole was intending on being here tonight and speaking with you all. Unfortunately, he had a prior engagement at CMA earlier today, and his travels didn't allow him the time to come and speak. So you're stuck with me. I don't know what I could add more to what she has given. She gave a great, you're a hard act to follow, lady. So what I'm going to talk about is basically us. We are the Edisto Natchez Kusso tribe. We are, our home base is here in Ridgeville, but our tribe kind of totters between Cottageville and Ridgeville. Of course, we are all sprinkled throughout the United States and probably the world if you took a tally. We are about 2,500 plus members strong, and we are a state-recognized tribe. A little bit about our history for those of you who do not know. The Kusso Indians are native to the Low Country, and we are well documented in history from at least about 1591. We are two parts of our tribe. So we are the Edisto, and that is not necessarily saying that we are part of the Edisto Indians from Edisto Island. The reason why we've adopted the name Edisto is because of the fact that we have lived near the Edisto River for so long. People automatically assumed, oh, you're the Edisto, so to keep things a lot less confusing, we had just adopted it. But we are the Natchez Kusso, or the Kusso Natchez, depending on what time of year, time of history you're looking at. So our home tribe would be the Kusso, or the Kussabo, depending on who is actually speaking. Say again? Oh yes, the Ashley River, sorry. This is not my area of expertise. We could talk about genealogy and we could talk about other things. But this is, I can talk about it if we're at home, but when I'm speaking in front of people, I feel like I need to be more formal. Anyway, so I'm just going to read what I have. Our other ancestors in the tribe descend from the Natchez, or the Natchez, which were once a very vast and powerful tribe that lived around present-day Natchez, Mississippi. Now, during that point in time, there was a thing called the French and Indian War. And the Natchez, or Natchez, depending on, I like to call them Natchez because it sounds fancy. But the Natchez were fighting with the French, and they kind of got a leg up on them and they scooted them out. And sometime later, they got into another scuffle with them. This time, the French aligned themselves with the Choctaw. And that kind of put a little hurting on us. And so we got booted out this time. And when they did, they fled to parts of North Carolina with the Cherokee. And at some point in time, they splintered off into 3 groups. And at different times, they came down. And one particular group splintered off to what is this area here. Another group went down further into Charleston, got into a little scuffle with the Catawba. They got themselves in trouble, so they went hiding out. They asked the governor for help. The governor said, okay, I'll take care of it, and then we went into hiding. We think that's when the two got together, but I wasn't there, so I can't say for real. So that's how we became the Kusso Natchez, or the Natchez Kusso. Between the 1840s and the 1850s, our ancestors started moving off the reservation. And the reservation that we call, I don't like that word, but anyhow, there was an area of land called Spoons that was given by the governor to give us because they wanted other land. But they, I think that's what, in Osborne? Osborne. And anyway, as they started leaving Osborne into going into other communities, One of them was called Creeltown, and the other one is Four Holes. Four Holes, Ridgeville, Creeltown, and Cottage. And this is where our core members are today. Creeltown and Four Holes was once all of Colleton County until they decided to take a piece off and then merge into Dorchester. In 1897, Dorchester County was established and divided the community into 2 counties. Since then, the members have scattered into Berkeley and Charleston County also. When our Indian school was closed, which was the last school the state had, the children had no place to receive the proper education, as you talked about earlier. The newly integrated school system did not have room for them. Maybe we can get some trailers. We have an actual news clip on our Facebook page that shows the actual news anchor saying, giving his piece on it, and then you have the superintendent of the school and the police hauling off people because there was a protest. They were angry because they wanted their children to go to the school, and they said, I don't have any room. Maybe we can get some trailers in a couple of months. Meanwhile, some of my aunts got arrested with the babies in tow. They just took them all to jail. I don't understand, but anyway. So at that particular time, we gathered as a group and decided we had to do something. So we officially elected one particular person to be our chief, and at that particular point in time, we became incorporated as a tribe. Because in order to do anything, you've got to be a group. That school was called the Indian Freedom School, or the Four Holes Indian Freedom School. That's right. We are the Indian organization. It was the Freedom, wasn't it the Freedom School? Freedom School.